Hello and welcome to Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio. This is Stefan, your host, British by birth, American by choice. The Founding Fathers crafted some remarkable documents that led to the creation of a great country founded on liberty and self-reliance. I have lived in the Euro-socialist nightmare, and I'm doing what I can to return this country to the vision that the Founding Fathers gave us. We need to strive to rebuild that shining city on the hill, for without us, the world has nowhere to turn for freedom. For the next hour, I will be presenting news, views, and guests that help keep the true spirit of America alive. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever, wherever you're listening to the show. This is Stefan, your Patrick Come Lately, welcoming you to episode 292, coming today again from East Connecticut. Yes, I'm back in the Hartford area. It's been rainy and cold today, and it's also been the same back home in Georgia. Tonight, I'm going to start with some sad news. Regular listeners will know that I often reference a frequent participant in the chat room each week, my author friend Edward Reapy, also known as Rex. In the last few weeks, I'd made mention that his better half, Marcia, was in and out of the hospital. Sadly, a couple of days ago, I saw on Facebook that she had passed on Saturday. If there is any consolation, it is that Edward was at her side almost all of the time over the last few weeks, as well as at her final moments. Edward and Marcia, I got to know when I was doing my Blog Talk Radio version of the show, and in those days I had a very easy way for guests to dial in, and Edward actually was, I think he's my most interviewed guest that's been on the show, and I remember at least one of those interviews that Marcia participated. I never did get to meet her face to face, but even so, I felt like I've lost a friend. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to start off today and just take a few minutes of my show to honor her and honor her memory by telling the story of her and Edward, as he is, things he's told me, things he's put out on the internet. If you are connected to Edward on Facebook, you may have seen some of this story. But it's one of those true love at first sight and love forever stories that I think bears telling again. Marcia and Edward grew up in Florida, just outside a sleepy little town at that time called Orlando. They went to school and the Oviedo Methodist Church together in their younger years for about 12 years. He was the bad boy from the town 6 miles away, and she was the good girl. She was the majorette, and he was the big man on campus, captain of the football and the basketball team. He was also a discipline problem, which doesn't surprise me. But she was the first person to tell him that he was a great guitar player. They drifted apart once Edward graduated in 1969, and that same year she ran away to New York, found her way to Geffen Records, and was the recording manager for groups like Guns N' Roses, Eddie Brickell, and a few others. And so he and she have platinum and gold records on the wall at home. Anyway, after a few years, their paths crossed again in a bar in their small hometown of Oviedo. And Edward likes to tell the story. He knows it was exactly 10:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, which I find very touching that he remembers that so precisely. But he probably can't tell you what she was wearing, because he tells everyone, I should have been more focused on her face than the rack she had developed since the last time I saw her. Her mom had died that day in 92, and she was there with one of her friends drowning her sorrows. Edward was there because he had just dropped off his 3 young kids with his ex-wife for their first time to spend Christmas morning with her, and he was going to be by himself. So he went to the bar for a drink, and she recognized him. He sort of recognized her. Think about that comment I just made that he tells about that meeting. But something clicked, and they've been together since that Christmas day, every day of their lives. At the time, Edward was the owner of a construction company in Florida. So after Christmas, basically the next day, she and her 2 kids moved in with him and his 3 kids into the house that Edward had on the high street in Oviedo. And he likes to say they became the Brady Bunch, right? Bringing all the kids in together. Another thing, of course, think about the Brady Bunch, Marsha, Marsha, Marsha. He also says that he could write a novel about the next few years, from breaking his back in an accident, a Rottweiler attack on Marsha that put her in the hospital, etc., etc., etc. But he says, looking back now, those were some of the best of times. One day, she came home and said that she wanted to be a carpenter. Now remember, he was working in construction. He was the owner of a construction company. He thought she was crazy. And according to him, you know when you're married to a strong woman when nothing you say derails her intentions. She quit Geffen Records, and so he decided to put her on the cut table for 4 crews when his company was building the Shades of Green resort at Disney. He tells the story of how he would normally place the cut table in the shade to get out of the hot Florida sun. In his own words, this was July. I placed the table directly in the sun, lathered her arms, legs, and back in sunscreen. The girl showed up for work wearing boots, denim shorts, and a bikini top to cut crown molding. And he instructed EJ, the lead cut guy who'd been with Edward for 4 years, to watch her and teach her. Well, EJ did his job well, and she's been Edward's cut person ever since. And the important thing was she still had all of her fingers right up to her last day on earth. EJ himself died later that year, about 3-4 months, from a drug overdose. That gives you a taste of how rough a crowd a woman has to run with in the union construction business. And she thrived in that. Anyway, they wound up in Vegas in about 2000 and decided to stay there after traveling to just about every city east of the Mississippi, installing expensive stuff for a millworks out of Canada. They lived in a small 26-foot fifth wheel trailer and made enough money, put the kids through schools like the University of Miami, Northwestern, and UCF. UCF was their alma mater. 7 years ago, Marsha started to trip over hoses on the ground, something that had never happened before. After a week of yelling at her to pick up her feet, or being worried that she'd break her arm or hip, he surprised her on the way home from work with a visit to a doctor. And then he got bad news after the doctor sent her to 17 different x-rays. Social Security disability granted her application in 1 month, so you can see it was quite serious. He knew that they were in deep doo-doo because it was a disease of which he had never heard. and her ability to walk started to gradually decline. 2 years later, he himself had a heart attack at home. Now, all heart attacks aren't something that happen in an instant. Somehow, after 2 hours of laying on the couch telling her that it was just heartburn, she managed to get him into their Chevy. This was on a Friday night, and the cops later told Edward that she was driving on the sidewalks on Flamingo in Las Vegas to get him into the ER. Friday night being a very busy night, obviously, on the roads of Vegas. He also found out later that if she'd been 5 minutes too late, he would not be around and he wouldn't be able to share this story, their love story, anymore. After that heart attack, when he was discharged, he was also classified disabled, and actually for a while more severely than she was, until the medication that he was taking and upping the levels, I know from stories with him, managed to stabilize him. So they did the only thing left for them that they could do to share their lives. She was now bedridden almost. He had to take things very calmly, so he started to write. Edward was having dreams that he could remember in great detail when he woke up afterwards. And that's what they did for the first year. He'd never heard of Amazon, other than perhaps for buying tools. So the first year he wrote the first of the series called the 2101 Chronicles. Marcia edited and proofread for him. His only goal really was to make her laugh and make her cry. But then his son told them about Amazon publishing, and he said, well, what the heck, might as well put my books out there. And he says he remembers that first royalty check, which was $7.87, which he found hard to believe at the time that anybody would pay for his books. Marcia herself was also an author. She didn't just edit and proofread, but she wrote herself. Her first book was The Las Vegas Worm Club. And by the way, let me recommend you go out, if you haven't read it, go out to Amazon and get it. It's a great book. That was her first one, and then there were others. Her last one was The 4th Street Monster Squad, something that Edward says is their only non-fictional tale. Well, sort of. It's also an interesting story. Edward told me it's really meant for young adults, but I said to him, well, I must be young at heart then, because I loved the story as well. And he says it was a glimpse actually into their future. But it is actually about goings on in Oviedo, sort of in the time. In the late 60s when they were both at school there. So, as I said earlier, we've had these. I've mentioned on the show in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks a number of times that Marcia's been in and out of a hospital, and she actually spent 3 weeks in critical care at a local hospital in Las Vegas, and Edward says it was becoming clear to him that things were not going well. And so for these, last week she was on the morphine drip all the time, but she would wake up and she'd be there. This last Saturday at 1 in the morning, she woke up and she told him that she wanted to go home. And he knew she wasn't talking about the luxury 40-foot RV that they bought last year, which was to help make their lives easier. He knew what she meant. At 4:30 that morning, a few hours later, all hell broke loose, but he'd already notified the crash team that it was all about to happen. She was starting to get very disoriented, but he was by her side all the time, holding her hand and telling her that he was not going anywhere. He talks about her brown eyes. He always says that she had the most beautiful brown eyes, locked with his, and she nodded her head when he told her that he loved her. She couldn't verbally answer because she had an oxygen mask on her face, but she squeezed his hand. And then the medical staff pushed him out of the room. They had chest compressions. They had the paddles to keep her going. There were 20 people in that room, and he knew that the end was near. He said he felt like he had a front row seat for an episode of ER. It was a nightmare. Doctor told him to go home and to get some rest. Remember, this is sort of 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. He himself was suffering badly. His feet and legs were swollen beyond belief. His blood pressure was sky high in spite of the meds that he takes. He went out to the Chevy in the hospital parking lot that had been parked there for days and went home. The doctors had told him not to give up hope and they would call when necessary. Their RV was only 10 minutes away, so he could be there very quickly. By now it was 6:15 in the morning. They also asked him if he and Marcia had discussed the issue of pulling the plug, and he told them they had. About 2 hours later, he was dozing in his easy chair, the one that he sits in when he writes, and they told him to get to the hospital as soon as possible. He was already dressed and ready to go. He knew that he was in for the worst time of his life that morning. They sent him to a special room just off the ER entrance. Edward soon realized that these people had done this before. Marcia had tubes in her mouth and machines everywhere. The doctor told him that he was going to inject her with something to bring her back to him for just a short while after the plug was pulled. Edward goes on to say, actually, it's not a plug, it's a button that you push. And he insisted on being the one to actually push the button. He says her eyes were open, but they were a million miles away. Everything after that slowed down. The doctor removed the tubes and tape from around her pretty face and used a vacuum to clear her throat while Edward pushed the button. At 8:30, she came back. Her brown eyes locked on his. She squeezed his hand and said, "I love you." 4 minutes later, she took her last breath. Marcia, as I said before, we never met face to face, but I really felt that I've lost a friend now. Rest in peace.
You can lose 10, 20, 30 pounds or more with Maximum Slim's first ever rapid weight loss guarantee. Today, you get Maximum Slim, an advanced fat and carb blocker, absolutely risk-free. The all-natural ingredients in Maximum Slim are a powerful weight loss combination. The Maximum Slim formula turns your body into a fat-burning furnace that supercharges your weight loss. Advanced fat and carb blocker stops the breakdown of sugar so your body doesn't store it as fat. Today, you'll get both of these products absolutely risk-free with no obligation. Only pay shipping. There are no expensive meal plans or exhausting DVDs. Just take Maximum Slim twice a day. It's fast, simple, and now it's guaranteed. Look, you can start losing weight today or not. Go back to your high school days and wear your favorite jeans again. Guaranteed. Call now and get both weight loss formulas free. Call 800-451-0228. 800-451-0228. That's 800-451-0228.
Doc, you gotta give it to me straight.
All right.
'Cause I'm dying here. I mean, take a look at this letter from the IRS.
Oh, my.
This is killing me, Doc. I tell you, it's killing me.
Cheer up, my friend.
Huh?
The tax doctor is here. My diagnosis tells me that you're going to be just fine.
Really?
The tax doctor will not rest until we find you the best possible tax settlement.
Really, Doc?
Guaranteed.
If the IRS claims you owe them $10,000 or more in business or personal back taxes, call a tax doctor right now. We could save you up to 75% if you qualify. Guaranteed or you pay nothing. Call right now for free details.
800-917-8546. 800-917-8546. 800-917-8546. That's 800-917-8546.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patrickcomelately.us. And we're back in the show. So after that sad news, I do want to bring some good news and get back to my objectives of educating folks. And as we the run up to the elections becomes more and more serious, things are things are getting exciting. Tonight was another one of the GOP debates. I was able to listen to part of the first one, and then also a lot of the second one. And I have to say that I think the debate, both of them, there was a lot more substance, real answers, little cage fighting. I was going to say no cage fighting. There were one or two incidents when people attacked each other. For the first debate, the kind of the JV debate, I think my impression was, and I didn't hear all of it, but my impression was that Chris Christie really came out on top of that one. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets a bump and is able to get back onto the main stage. One of the things that I liked of what I did hear, that he, more than any of the other candidates in that JV debate, managed to turn every question away from his fellow candidates on stage. So anywhere where they were sort of trying to push him to say something about his fellow candidates, and he managed to turn it around and brought Hildebeest in as the antagonist. So he really he was doing that very well. For the main debate, I think everybody got great opportunities to say their piece. Surprisingly enough, I think Rand Paul put some very strong messages out there. Now, I'm not really a favorite. I don't really favor Rand Paul that much, but I think he put his arguments. I think all of them put some very strong arguments. If anything, my main favorite, and I've been very open about this, Donald Trump, I was a little disappointed, was, I think, sometimes a little too contentious with people. That was the impression I got. I don't think he did himself a lot of good today in the debate. So we'll have to wait and see what the polls say, and then, but more importantly, in about 80 days from now, what the voters start saying, because that's going to be what's important. But all in all, I think that Fox Business News did a much better job than any of the other debates, including the initial Fox one, of again not having much in the way of cage fighting. They weren't deliberately setting people up as much. There were one or two questions where they did kind of pit one against the other, but in general, most of the questions were, I think, a lot more substantive, and also allowed them the answers to be more substantive. And what was interesting, sometimes at the end of a particular section, when somebody had been asked a question, then one of the moderators would actually ask clarification questions, and sometimes important, because they would pick on something where you should say, I hadn't thought of that, or, why didn't they ask that? Well, they did ask that. So I think this debate was a lot better. Now, was it exactly what I would like to see? I still think that the debate, both for the JV and the main debate, had a little bit too much aspect of a group interview. And what I mean by that is this idea that the moderators are not actually moderators. They are interviewing these folks. They are asking questions. I would love to see a debate where they actually have more of a debate, and the moderator just does something to perhaps set a topic and say, talk about this topic, and then lets them talk. And all the moderator is responsible for is basically ensuring that everybody gets their chance to speak and everybody remains within the time that they are supposed to. I would like to see a debate of that fashion. This one came the closest of all the debates to date to doing that, but I think it could have been better. So we have a bunch of very strong conservatives, and I'm glad to say that in both debates, a number of candidates made mention when, again, the moderators might ask a question where they're kind of saying, well, you know, how are you different to somebody on the stage, or in some other way kind of pit one against the other, that in many cases, I know Chris Christie did it, it happened in the main debate as well. I can't remember who actually said it, but basically words to the effect of, well, you know, we have our differences, everybody up here on stage, but basically whichever plan we're talking about, whichever topic, whichever policy we're discussing right now, the people up here on stage have a 10 times better solution. Any one of them has a 10 times better solution than anything that the Democrats and Hillary Clinton are proposing. And yeah, so I was then interested to come across an article where a political commentator basically was talking about what's going on, because, you know, we've had a little bit of a roller coaster ride in terms of, you know, political power. And what this article said, there was back in 2004, many commentators were speculating about the possibility of a permanent majority for Republicans, along the lines of the Democratic dominance of national elections following the Great Depression. But then again, 2 years later, a wave election delivered the House of Representatives to the Democrats, totally unexpected. And by 2009, Barack Obama, a Democrat, was president, and not just that, he had majorities in the House and the Senate. So, you know, in the space of 5 years, that totally turned around. So 2009, 2010, and you get to 2014, and now, in a way, the shoe's on the other foot. Commentators are saying that the Republican Party was on its way out. It was going to be a regional rump party confined to the South, and the Democrats would be back in power for years to come. Yes, the Republicans might win a few midterm elections here and there, but they were demographically doomed at the presidential level. So many people are thinking this now that when the commentator that wrote this article said the Republicans were likely to retake the White House in 2016, people stared at her as if she was walking on water. Now, the midterm elections 2014 didn't shake the people. They said, well, that's just a midterm, but, you know, the White House, that's the one, you know, that's the national election, and the midterm is very different. So the elitists in Washington still very much think Democrats have a chance in 2016. But this commentator says no, and it's not so much what's happening in the midterms, but recent elections. Last week I mentioned that there have been, you know, plenty of good news for Republicans, and she specifically mentions the fact that Tea Party favorite Matt Bevin won the upset election in the Kentucky's governor's race. And this was something that was a total surprise, because Democrats have controlled Kentucky for 40 of the last 44 years, but he won by a 9% margin. This is after polls had shown that his Democratic opponent, Jack Conway, was in a narrow lead, although the New York Times was speculating Bevin might eke out a victory if he could drive enough conservative Christians to go to the polls. So these polls were kind of forecasting a Democratic victory, and it turned out to be a conservative one. And now the latest Quinnipiac poll shows Clinton losing to every major Republican primary contender, except perhaps Trump. So even if you believe the more favorable polls, most Democrats would not want to see them so close. Not when Clinton is actually a widely known name, and her nomination is practically sewn up. And they say most Americans would probably know Rubio as Marco Who. So he doesn't have the name recognition. A lot of the other ones don't have the name recognition. What happens when they get into the debates with her and get the name recognition? She's only got one place to go, and that's down. So why would that be? Well, before we talk about that, it's time for the next commercial break. And so let's play that, and I will be back.
Patriot come lately. British by birth. American by choice. Just like the Founding Fathers. The voice of the conservative resistance.
Every day, millions of Americans grow more concerned about the future of our great nation. The truth is, over the last century, a small but powerful collectivist movement known as progressivism has debased our politics, our culture, and our currency. We're just a small step from falling into 1,000 years of darkness, as Ronald Reagan warned. Friend, this is Pat Boone with an important free offer on a hot new book called The Great Withdrawal by Craig Smith and Lowell Ponte. This new book explains how we, the people, can end this fatal detour into big government and get back on the path of faith and freedom charted by our founders. Call now for a free copy of the hot new book called The Great Withdrawal.
Call now for your free copy. 800-978-3901. 800-978-3901. 800-978-3901. That's 800-978-3901.
Owe $10,000 or more to the IRS that you can't pay? Call now for immediate help. At the Tax Relief Line, we help people just like you. If you take on the IRS alone, you could be facing levies, liens, even wage garnishments, personal or business tax issues. If you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS, call now and see if you can pay less. They can freeze your bank accounts, even garnish your wages. Call the Tax Relief Line now for immediate help. Our expert team of tax professionals will negotiate your tax problem and deal with the IRS for you. If the IRS is threatening you with levies, wage garnishments, or seizing your assets, call now and see if you can pay the IRS less.
888-789-5043. 888-789-5043. 888-789-5043. 888-789-5043.
This is Patriot Come Lately Talk Radio, keeping the spirit of America alive, a proud member of the Red State Talk Radio Network. And welcome back into the second half of the show. Before we talk about why the Democrats may have such a rough time coming up in the 2016 election, I I normally play some music round about this time, and I was looking for something that is appropriate given the news about my dear friends Edward and Marsha Reapy, and the fact that Marsha's no longer with us. But the title of this song says it all, because this is where she is right now. Let me play this song by Bruce Ballot, and as I said, listen to the title, to the main words, because that's where she is.
At a public school in 4th grade in 1961, we'd start each day the same way, say the 23rd Psalm. We'd pledge allegiance to the flag, recite the Golden Rule, and the 10 Commandments proudly hung in the hallway of the school. Every time there was a gathering, someone would always pray. There was no doubt that back then God blessed the USA. Now it seems we turned our back on God, though we say in God we trust. And I wouldn't blame him in the least if he turned his back on us. How many cried his holy name when the terrorist attacked? You know the devil and his gang will keep on coming back. What's next for us? What does it take to make us understand? We need to take this country back and put it back in God's hands. In the 4th grade, went to school with her today. We pledged allegiance to the flag, but under God we did not say. No Bible in the classroom, they didn't know the Golden Rule, and the 10 Commandments were long gone from the hallway of the school. Even at a football game, are we allowed to pray? How could we let this happen? How did it get this way? Our kids aren't taught the truth anymore. Don't you think that it's a shame? The greatest nation on this earth, built upon God's name. How many cried his holy name when the terrorist attacked? You know the devil and his gang will keep on coming back. What's next for us? What does it take to make us understand? We need to take this country back and put it back in God's hands. What's next for us? What does it take to make us understand? We need to take this country back and put it back in God's hands. In God's hands. In God's hands.
So, Rex, if it's any consolation, that's exactly where your Marsha is right now. She's back in God's hands. Okay, let's continue. We were talking about why the Democrats seem to be losing, and perhaps some of it has has to do with, and if you're a liberal and say, well, Barack Obama is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and everything he's done is great, it's still been a rough time for your party under his leadership, right? Democrats have lost about 900 state legislature seats, 12 governor seats, 69 House seats, and 13 Senate seats. So, it could be a coincidence, it could be unrelated to anything Obama's done, but it happened on his watch. And many commentators think they may be connected, because parties are often most vulnerable at precisely the moment when they themselves feel the strongest. And this gets related back, of course, to Obamacare, because the fact that it was passed, despite the fact that it was so unpopular, despite the fact that no one in the opposition party wanted to touch it, so totally against, absolutely no bipartisanship whatsoever, despite the fact that the voters of Massachusetts, where let's face it, the model for Obamacare came from Massachusetts, they sent a Republican to the Senate to vote against it. And how did Washington handle that? They bent the rules, they broke the rules to force that down our throats. So did the Democrats just accept their goal of national health care? Did they realize that there was a price to pay? They were alienating voters and losing control of lower offices? I don't think it was a conscious decision, but they did sacrifice a lot of low-margin Democrats in the House and Senate, and they would have been necessary to get things done. And that's when we got this gridlocked Congress. So a lot of the time as well, the Democrats really think they don't need to do anything for it. All they need is Barack Obama sitting in the Oval Office and they can get everything they want. Well, commentator says Kentucky illustrates the danger of this strategy, because the outgoing Democratic government, Steve Beshear, Kentucky was the poster child for the success of Obamacare under him. Under the incoming governor now, Matt Bevin, it may be a poster child for how Obamacare failed, because Beshear built the state exchange. He expanded Medicaid by executive order because the legislature wouldn't give him what he wanted. It's a great strategy. It's what Obama's doing. If the Congress won't give me what I want, I'll write an executive order. But folks, learn from this, because now, if it's an executive order, the incoming executive can overturn it. So as long as your party holds the executive pen, you're okay. But when they lose that, everything can reverse. Now, is Bevin going to pull back on the exchange and the Medicaid expansion? There are signs towards the vote about a week or two ago that he may be kind of backtracking a little bit about that, especially the Medicaid expansion. But people, and this commentator is saying, Democrats, you need to look at this because there is a danger there. On top of that, what you get through executive orders tends to be more radical than you get through the normal legislative process, because basically you're only getting it from one side and there is no opportunity for softening, for changing, for molding a little bit through the legislative body. Although with the Harry Reid in place, that didn't make much difference anyway, because he wasn't allowing anything anyway. But so this radicalism appeals to the base, but it also has political costs because those in the middle don't like it. So, again, the Obama regime, right, is also putting a number of regulations in place, right? The regime wouldn't have put its weight behind a bill to force schools to let trans girls, so boys that think they are girls, change in open locker rooms. But now the Department of Education is doing that with a rule and forcing that on a school district in Illinois. Greenhouse emissions are a lot stronger than they would have been if they'd come through the Congress. But by doing it through executive order, you're alienating a lot of people and you're opening the door for executive order or for regulations to be overturned. And in the debate today, that's exactly what a lot of people were saying. Okay, folks, I see it's time for the final commercial break here. So let me quickly run through that, and then we'll finish off with a little bit more good news.
The offer of a franchise can only be made through delivery of a franchise disclosure document. Imagine yourself being a leader in America's fastest-growing demographic category. More than 10,000 people a day turn 65, and a large percentage are going to need a helping hand at home or in choosing the right assisted living community. Always Best Care is looking for people who've excelled at everything they've done, but they're seeking a new challenge. Always Best Care is one of the fastest-growing companies in this explosive field. We're looking for 25 new franchisees to keep our booming business growing. We'll back you up with the strongest award-winning marketing program in the industry, and we'll provide the special training and support that's fueled our growth to prepare you for this great opportunity. All that's missing is you. Call Always Best Care toll-free at 1-800-643-7508. That's 1-800-643-7508. For Always Best Care, 1-800-643-7508. Call today.
Are you worried about losing your home to foreclosure? If you've been threatened with foreclosure or received legal papers from your bank, you have approximately 30 days to respond. If you do not respond, you could lose your home. You have rights. Act now to protect your rights. You can stay in your home. Many times you can even modify your loan. The bottom line is you can get past this, but you must act right now. Call National Foreclosure Defense right now at 800-296-3006, 800-296-3006. If you've been served by your bank and you're worried about losing your home to foreclosure, now is the time to fight back and save your home. Time is limited, so call right now. 800-296-3006, 800-296-3006. Call the professionals at National Foreclosure Defense right now. 800-296-3006.
If you're diabetic, this message could change your life. Is your blood sugar out of control even when you do all the right stuff? Are you afraid of diabetic blindness and the risk of amputation, as well as all those other side effects? Well, you should be. Is there anything that could help manage your blood sugar? Nobetes is a natural supplement that may quickly and dramatically lower your blood sugar.
My name is Bob Corder. I've been using Nobetes for about 3.5 to 4 months now. And in the first 3 months, I've actually lowered my blood sugars from 500s down to 139, and then it dropped to 88 to 93.
My name is Kirsten. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and while taking Nobetes, my blood sugar levels dropped from 295 to 115 in just 1 day.
The FDA hasn't evaluated these statements, and Nobetes isn't intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. But for many, it's helped drop their blood sugar. So if you've been evaluated with high blood sugar, don't delay. Evaluate Nobetes now. Call 800-551-8302 and get your free bottle. Just cover shipping and handling. Call 800-551-8302. That's 800-551-8302.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patrickcomelately.us. And we're into the final segment of the show. Just a couple of things I want to talk about this good news. So One of the things is, I talked last week about the fact that a lot of these Obamacare co-ops are failing. Over half of them are failing. And now we have a fairly successful state exchange that Matt Bevin has an opportunity to get rid of, which could also contribute to the demise of Obamacare. So, folks, the writing is on the wall. Keep an eye open. We talk a lot about Matt Bevin, but there's also his running mate, the lieutenant governor of Kentucky, is a woman. So here's another nail in the coffin of the Republican war on women. They have a woman as the lieutenant governor, and not only is she a woman, she's also black. She's the first black to win statewide office in Kentucky. But she says, I just see myself as a person. I don't see myself as Janine, black person. Janine Hampton told the Louisville local newspaper. I'm just Janine, who happens to be black. And, folks, there's hope for you yet. She's a Tea Party activist who has never held elected office. So, folks, get up off that couch, get out there and start running for something. You can do it. She vowed that when she was young, she would not live a life of poverty, and a huge part of what formed her opinions was the peer pressure that she got when she was young to fail, because she came from inner city Detroit. So you see, the peer pressure there is to fail, not to succeed. And that's why the Democrats do what they do as well. The pressure is to fail and not to be successful. Okay, folks, we're getting close to the end of the show. I'm going to stop there. Had some other interesting items coming up. Things about some fights against political corruption, because that's another thing that I like to rant on about. I'm going to save that for next week so I can give it more justice. I do want to thank those of you that are listening to the show, whether it's live. Did miss Rex this week, but I understand totally that it didn't really expect him to come in. But also those of you that listen to the recordings, keep Rex in your thoughts and prayers, please. He's one of the good guys, and there's not a lot like him out there. And by the way, if you haven't read any of his books, go out to Amazon, have a look for his books, look for Marsha's books. They are great fun to read. So we're slowly coming to the end of the show. I want to remind you, please share this with your friends. Share the links. You can tell them they can hear the recordings either at radio.patrickcomelately.us. They can hear them at archives.patrickcomelately.us, or they can listen to redstatetalkradio.com or the 405media.com. And both of those sites rebroadcast this show, and hopefully, like I said, we can get the message out as we get into the swing of things for next year's election. Remember, Iowa is just over 80 days away. We need to get the message out. We need to make sure that we have a good, strong candidate that comes up next November and beats Hillary Clinton. So, folks, I see that the music is starting. I will sign off with TTFN. Please, ta-ta for now. Please join me again next week. Thank you for listening to the show. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's topics. Whether you listened live, to a recording, or to a rebroadcast, I appreciate the time you share with me. We need to spread the message of liberty far and wide. So please tell your friends and family about the show. Thank you for helping to keep the beacon of hope burning. This is Stefan, your Patrick Come Lately, signing off. God bless America, and remember, L3, long live liberty.